What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel. I am joined, as always, by Daniel Starkin. And this is your home for the 2020 World Series champions. As we approach the 2021 season, we need to remind ourselves every once in a while that we're still the champs. Dodgers are still the reigning champs. Daniel, how are you doing? I know we're still waiting on news. It hasn't come yet, but how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I can see the start of spring training is just around the corner, so I'm excited to finally get some baseball back. Yeah, Dodgers haven't been too active, not a whole lot to talk about, but we'll find a way to get through it. A lot of good stuff going on across the league and in Dodgerland, so I'm looking forward to a good show tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's February 1st, which means we are officially in the month of spring training. I think some players report like February 17th, so we're just over 2 weeks away, which is crazy to think. Obviously, the 2020 season ran longer than expected due to the changes in schedule. So it is a shorter offseason, not by a ton, but it is a little bit shorter. And so it's crazy to think that we're already here. But, I mean, I know you and I are both excited about the prospect of this Dodger team getting back on the field. And even just as fans and wanting something to talk about. I mean, just get some action, some things going. So I'm excited for that. Hey, we appreciate you joining us if you're watching it live on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope. We appreciate you. We can see we got a handful of folks commenting, so please comment throughout the show. We're going to do a mailbag at the end. We've got a couple questions folks have submitted on Twitter, which we appreciate. I was joking. I mean, until Justin Turner signs, we got to find ways to fill this up. We sort of every week we just kind of just get enough, and so we do have some good stuff. So here's the plan for tonight. One of the big stories for the Dodgers this past week is Joc Pederson signing with the Chicago Cubs. Again, not a huge surprise that he isn't with the Dodgers. But it brought up a conversation I'd like to have, which is there's a few guys the Dodgers have let walk this offseason. Have the Dodgers actually upgraded in those positions? That'll be our first conversation. We'll talk about some breaking news over the last couple of days, specifically leading up to tonight, which is some negotiations, if you want to call them that, between the Players Association and the owners.
Classic,
and
right?
Is the season going to start on time? Is it going to be 162 games? It seems like we've gotten some clarity on that in the last couple of hours. And then some other news. Nelson Cruz, there was a story from The Athletic that Nelson Cruz was intrigued by the possibility of joining the Dodgers should there be a National League DH. We can talk Nolan Arenado trade as well. Obviously, one of the best players in baseball leaves the Dodgers division, stays in the National League. And then last but not least, Keith Law had a tidbit about Keibert Ruiz possibly being a guy the Dodgers would be willing to talk about trading. So that's our agenda for tonight, but let's dive right in. The big story again this week, Joc Pederson signs with the Cubs, 1 year, $7 million. The number felt about right for me. Unfortunately for Joc, reports came out that he actually had a better offer earlier in the offseason, believed to be from the White Sox for about $10 million. He turned it down. They signed Adam Eaton, and then the market that Joc thought was going to develop just never did. So Joc is gone. Kike Hernandez has signed with the Red Sox. Pedro Baez has signed with the Houston Astros. And it brought up the idea of have the Dodgers upgraded. And I'll say this up front. I'm not taking credit for this idea. There's a couple places that have started to have this conversation. MLB.com is one of them. I'm big on wanting to give credit where credit is due. There's another website that occasionally tweets similar things to what I tweet about 3 hours after I do. So we want to be upfront here. We want to give people credit when they do. But that's the question. I mean, when I look at Baez, when I look at Pederson, and when I look at Hernandez, have the Dodgers upgraded those positions, Daniel? So let's start in order that they signed. Pedro Baez signs with the Houston Astros. The comp on the Dodgers side is the acquisition of Knebel. He's going to make about $5 million in arbitration. In your estimation, going from Baez to Knebel, have the Dodgers upgraded that sort of setup man type role this year?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with that one, we kind of have to just wait and see because we're not exactly sure what we're going to be getting out of Knebel. Yeah. Well, in his prime, 2017, 2018, he was one of the best closers in all of baseball. So if they're getting that guy, absolutely, that's an upgrade. But he's just coming off Tommy John surgery. He only threw a handful of innings in 2020. So we don't really know what we're getting with him. But one thing I will say is his ceiling is much higher than Baez's. But with that being said, Baez is a lot more consistent. Yeah. Like Baez had, I don't know how many years it was, 6 or 7, but they were all good years with the Dodgers. Like he never had an ERA like above mid threes. Like he was as consistent as they come. He wasn't exactly all that trustworthy in the postseason. I don't know if that's the first guy you want in a high leverage type situation with runners on base. So I think Knebel is probably going to end up being an upgrade there. But I think we have to wait and see what Knebel we're getting. Are we getting the guy who was a dominant closer, or are we getting the guy who threw, I don't know, it was only a handful of innings in 2020 and wasn't all that good, to be honest. So that's kind of a wait and see. But I do think the Dodgers bullpen as a whole has a ton of depth that Baez isn't a huge loss, just overall, I'd say.
Yeah. And so 13 innings in 2020 for Corey Knebel, a 6.08 ERA. His strikeout rate was down. His walk rate was up. So 2020, not great. 2019, he misses the entire season from Tommy John. Now what the Dodgers are betting on is 2017 and 2018. 2017 was unbelievable. 1.78 ERA in 76 appearances. He was near the top 5 in the league in FIP. Fourth in saves. He had the highest strikeout per 9 of any pitcher by 2. He had a 14.92 strikeouts per 9. That was 2 strikeouts per 9 higher than anybody else in baseball. 92% left on base percentage, the highest strikeout percentage. 2018, he comes right back, 14.31 strikeouts per 9. ERA ticked up a little bit, but you can see the stuff. And so for me, that one, I would actually say I feel pretty confident the Dodgers have upgraded. I hear you on he missed all of 2019. Small sample size wasn't great in 2020, but I just trust the Dodgers, and we've talked about it before. I just want to bet on ceiling far more than betting on the floor. And I think Knebel, I think even this past year, the strikeout rate, he's still striking out 10 batters per 9. The question for the Dodgers is the walk rate. His control has been the issue. In 2017, his best year, he had the 4th worst walk rate in all of baseball. It got better in 2018, but back up in 2020 again. So that's the catch for me, but I like Knebel over Baez.
Yeah, I mean, if we're getting, the Knebel that he's capable of being, it's absolutely an upgrade. And one thing I will say is I trust the Dodgers probably more than any other organization to get him back to that point, right? Like that we've seen what their coaching staff could do, and just playing around so many other talented players. Like there's so much less pressure on Knebel, with the Dodgers than with the Brewers when he was, the closer. And I feel like his best years were like pre-Josh Hader. So he was kind of the only guy that first year. So that's a ton of pressure. So he won't have that with the Dodgers. They're not going to ask him to be his closer unless he starts striking out everyone again. Then it's definitely a possibility. But there's so many other talented relievers in that bullpen that he could learn from and take things from. So I definitely think he's in the right spot to get back to where he was pre-injury.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think. Going into 2019, Knebel was set to be the Brewers' closer. It was not Josh Hader that had that position. Right. That's how good Knebel had been. So that speaks volumes there. And, I mean, I just think if you and I at the beginning of the offseason said you could either have Baez or you could have Knebel, I think both of us would take Knebel. Definitely. So, JJ, I see your comment in the question there asking about Justin Turner. We're going to talk about him later. I mean, the short version is we don't have an update, but who knows? Maybe we're going to get an update tonight. We'll see. But let's move on to the second position of switching, which is Kike Hernandez is gone. He signed a 2-year deal with the Boston Red Sox, $7 million for him as well per year, so $14 million, which is a remarkably high number for me. Shout out to Kike. Good for you. Get your money. The replacement for Kike is a guy that many people may not be totally familiar with, and that's Zach McKinstry. And I can get into his numbers here in a little bit. He's a 25-year-old. In 2019, he slashed a batting average of 300, on base of 366, slugging percentage of 516. He had 19 home runs in 121 games. That was a AA and AAA. This is what's crazy. He played second base, third base, shortstop, left field, and center field in the minors. He also played right field for the Dodgers in 2020. So basically every infield position except first and every outfield position he has played in 2019 or 2020. This one's a little more complicated. I'm curious your take. Kike Hernandez or Zach McKinstry? Who do you like as far as is McKinstry an upgrade over Kike Hernandez?
Yeah, this one definitely is complicated just because we don't know a whole lot about McKinstry unless you watch minor league games religiously. But I will say anyone who watched spring training and summer camp last year, he was kind of one of the breakout stars that really showed he could hit big league pitching. Like you said, he's got the same versatility that Kike has. I'd say he's probably a slightly worse defender, which is no knock at all. Like Kike is an incredible defender at basically every position. But I will say I think he will have a better bat than Kike ultimately. I don't know about right away. Like when a guy's first coming up, his first taste of big league action may take him some time to adjust. And there is other guys to help fill the need. Like Obviously, Chris Taylor's still around. He's going to be the primary utility guy. Gavin Lux could see some time at second base and then maybe even shortstop as well. So it will be kind of a group effort to replace Kike, I'd say, but McKinstry definitely will get a shot at it. And I think long term, he projects as a better bat than Kike and a slightly worse defender, which I'd say I'd take that, honestly. Like, give me the better bat every day of the week, as long as he's not a bad defender, which by all accounts, McKinstry's not a bad defender at all. He's a good one. So, yeah.
Yeah, Kike, by the end, I mean, his value was as a defensive replacement, right? He was the guy that you brought in to play second base at the end of a game just for defense. Now, earlier on, he was a guy who could sort of mash the one side of the plate that he could hit from kind of thing, and the power was always there, but that was what was the problem, I think, for me, is the consistency with the bat. There just got to be too many points where it felt like an automatic out when Kike was up. Now, there were times he came through and he had big home runs, but I think that's going to be the difference with McKinstry. I mean, again, we're talking minor leagues, but to hit 300 with an OPS of almost 900 with 19 home runs in 120 games for a guy that plays 6 different positions, I mean, that's remarkable. And as you said, I mean, he's not going to be a defensive replacement, it doesn't seem like, but he's competent, more than competent, at a lot of these positions. Now, he's 25, so in a lot of places, he's not like a top 100 prospect. But when you read about people that follow the prospects, a lot of them really like McKinstry. And it's almost like, well, we didn't want to put a 25-year-old on our top 100 list, but if we were going to put one, we really like McKinstry. It was an upswing in 2019. I mean, it was a tick up from expected, but I'm with you. I mean, I just think he's going to give the Dodgers far more consistency in that role as far as what they get. He might be a tick down in power, but it's the batting average, as far as just consistent at bats is probably going to be more in line with the typical utility guy. And I mean, and McKinstry is the classic Dodger prospect in that any other franchise, he's probably penciling himself into a starting position somewhere. This year. With the Dodgers, it's like, hey, take a seat behind Chris Taylor in the utility role, but thanks for coming and we'll have you. So I think that one's complicated. I mean, if we're going strictly on 2021, I probably would prefer Kike just because of the defense and because of just a known commodity a little bit. But I mean, we're talking about a guy with a number of years of team control left who's going to cost them next to nothing. There's a lot to like with McKinstry.
Yeah. And one other thing that I think makes it even more complicated is that McKinstry hits left-handed, whereas Kike hit right-handed. So a lot of Kike's opportunities came against left-handed pitching just because the Dodgers had a lot of left-handed bats that couldn't hit lefties, and Kike, maybe not the last couple years, but before that was actually really good at hitting lefties. So I would expect McKinstry's opportunities to come in different spots, mainly against right-handed pitching. So I wouldn't say he's just a straight-up replacement for Kike. He's a utility guy, so in that sense, yes, he's Kike's replacement, but I don't think he would be, starting in the same type of games that Kike would have been starting in.
And that's a good point, especially in that the Dodgers need right-handed hitting. I mean, they have a lot of lefties. And so McKinstry benefits, not to mention, I think it's 2/3 of major league pitchers are right-handed. So you're going to see a lot more right-handers than you are going to see left-handers. But I don't think McKinstry has nearly the sort of the splits that Kike did, where it was like he crushed one side and couldn't hit the other, basically. Well, let's get to the third one, and that's Joc Pederson. He goes away and signs with the Cubs this year. Again, 1 year, $7 million deal. Joc was interesting because I don't know who the replacement is for Joc. So I'll ask you, who's taking Joc Pederson's at-bats? I mean, is it Edwin Rios, who's not a direct comp because he's not going to necessarily be playing left field? Is it a guy like DJ Peters or Zach Rex, Matt Beatty? Who do you have as the guy who's taking Joc Pederson's at-bats?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be kind of a combo of those guys. Joc, he played the outfield, and he really, the opposite of Kike, he really only started against right-handed pitching. They had no trust in him against lefties. Yeah. So, I mean, when you look at the left field situation for the Dodgers, it's going to be A.J. Pollock almost every day, definitely against lefties. So there may be some, opportunities against righties there for the guys you mentioned, Rios, Beatty, even Gavin Lux. Yeah. Of those three, I'd say Beatty is the only one that you could feel at least a little comfortable in left field.
Yeah.
And Gavin Lux, there's been some whispers about him potentially playing some left, but no one has confirmed that yet. That's all just speculation, mainly on our part, just because it would make some sense as a natural kind of Joc replacement. But yeah, I think it's going to be kind of a combo of those guys. It'll take some maneuvering. Too. Yeah, Chris Taylor is. Yeah, you can move Chris Taylor from second to to left field and then start Lux at second, or move Muncy over to second and start Rios at first. So it will take some maneuvering, but I think the Dodgers more or less have the guys to replace Joc. Hitting right-handed pitching has never been an issue for the Dodgers. I feel like they have so many left-handed bats on their roster, and even more guys coming up. So I don't think that'll be a huge problem. Selfishly, I'm going to miss Joc. He was one of my favorite Dodgers of the last few years. The guy's just hilarious for me, and he came up with so many big hits in October. So I wish Joc nothing but the best of luck with the Cubs. But yeah, I'm going to miss him for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and if you missed it, Matt Moreno and I did a show earlier this week when Joc signed,
that was really good,
talking about like sort of the top 5 moments that we remembered, and I mentioned it. I mean, his home run derby, it's like one of my favorite moments as a baseball fan ever, period. I know it's a meaningless event. I love the home run derby, and so to see the most exciting home run derby ever and to have a Dodger firmly in the middle of it was awesome. Mm-hmm. So I'm with you, always going to miss Joc. And it is interesting now. I mean, McKinstry, right? It's like Joc plus Kike will be replaced by McKinstry plus Chris Taylor. Like it's probably some combination of those two, which is interesting. But to your point, I mean, Joc obviously wasn't providing a ton in the outfield. As of today, there's not a designated hitter, and so Pollock, gives you way more out in left field, and it just made sense for him to leave. One name that you brought up that I find interesting, and I'm going to throw this out to the commenters as well, Matt Beatty. I'm curious, like, when you think of Matt Beatty, what do you think? Is this a guy that like a starting level Major League Baseball player? Is this a like, sort of like 10th man for the rest of his career? Like, what do you, because I don't know if what I think about Matt Beatty puts me in the minority of Dodger fans, but I just don't view Matt Beatty as like a guy that should be playing serious, like getting serious ABs for a team as good as the Dodgers. I just think he's like an average major leaguer, but on a team like the Dodgers, I don't know if we should be playing average major leaguers.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say with Beatty because he's really never gotten that opportunity with the Dodgers to be an everyday type player. Maybe if he was in another rebuilding type organization, they would have given him a season where they would say, hey, go play first base. Let's see how you do. Unfortunately, he's not getting that with the Dodgers, so we don't really know what he would be if that was the case. With that being said, though, I kind of view him how you do, just kind of as an average major leaguer. He's a solid bench bat, could come up with some big hits, in big spots, pinch hitting type situations. But he doesn't bring much defensively. Like, he's okay at first, could play a little left, be serviceable out there, I guess. Same thing with third base, like potentially be serviceable, but he doesn't have a natural position. And just with how much talent the Dodgers have, he's just never going to have an everyday role. So I've been saying for years that I wouldn't be surprised if he was a trade candidate. Just kind of if the Dodgers were to make some sort of deal, like if he was involved in that package, it would not be surprising to me. Kind of like how when the Dodgers made that Reds trade where they gave up Puig and Alex Wood, and then Kyle Farmer was just kind of thrown in there. Like it's kind of like that for me. Like he's not going to get a whole lot of playing time in LA, so he probably would make sense elsewhere. But if he does stick around, he's probably just a bat off the bench for me.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who's going to turn 28 basically before this season starts, and he'll turn 28 at the end of April. He's played 120 games. He's got 322 career at-bats, 258, 11 home runs. So, I mean, that's not bad. I mean, you factor that out over a full season. If you've got a guy that's hitting 260 with 15 to 20 home runs, I mean, that's more than serviceable. I guess I hear about guys like DJ Peters, some of the other outfield prospects they have, Cody Thomas, those types of guys. And I'm like, I just don't know if the upside, I talk a lot about upside. Matt Beatty is a high floor, low ceiling guy. Like he's competent, and having those guys around is fine, and they provide value. But I don't know. It's an interesting one. And I'm with you. I mean, it feels like if there's a trade to be made and there's a team that is just looking for some guys to plug holes at the major league level, that would be the type of guy. Let's see. So not an everyday starter is what Nicholas Ramos says. Bob Jones says, I feel like he'll become a starter in a few years. Outlaw Star says Rios over Beatty. I think we both agree there. Derek agrees with us on Beatty. DJ Jesse says he's a fill-in, not an everyday guy. Kenneth says he just hasn't gotten the looks yet, which I think is fair. I mean, 120 games over 2 years, but there's no consistency there. 322 at-bats. How many of those were like starting, that kind of thing? Robert says Beatty has something there. DJ Jesse reminds me of Dave Hansen. I mean, that's a throwback, but Dave Hansen was pretty good. I mean, Dave Hansen might have been a tick better. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. Dave Hansen in my mind, maybe he was just on such a bad team that I was like, oh, Dave Hansen, not terrible. Miyu says Rios has power. Beatty has better bat speed. Robert just likes to look at the plate. DJ Jesse, he'll fit good with the Angels. There you go. Yeah, I mean, so I think people are in agreement with us that they like. I mean, Rios belongs in his own category. He was a fascinating guy when I got to sit down with Pedro Mora just to be like, what's the belief on Rios? I mean, you look, and Pedro, he didn't have a ton of insight into that, but just looking at, it's like, I mean, you look at the numbers, how could you not like what you have here? Yeah. And yet there's some of that where it's like, are the Dodgers actually giving him a chance? Like, it doesn't feel like they're necessarily making room for him, but you could argue that, not to go too far down a tangent, but maybe they're playing hardball with Justin Turner because they have a guy like Edwin Rios behind him. If Rios didn't exist, maybe they'd have a 3-year deal signed with Justin Turner already. Who knows? So I mean, just looking at the overall, you've got Baez gone, you've got Kike gone, and you've got Joc gone. I think we're both in agreement. We like the roster going into 2021 better than we liked the roster at the end of 2020. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the addition of Price has to do with that as well. Yep. And just the overall bullpen moves they made. Like, they added a lot of bullpen depth. So we
still have Dylan Floro too. Keep that in mind.
Well, we'll have to wait and see, how that plays out. We don't know which relievers are going to hit, which aren't. But yeah, I'd say overall, feeling really good about this roster if they could just add Justin Turner, one more right-handed bat. And one last thing on Beatty, I'm actually legitimately curious to see what they do with him, even if they don't trade him, if he makes the opening day roster, just because I feel like with Rios and McKinstry, though, that's already 2 left-handed bats off the bench. And with the loss of Kike, that's losing a right-handed bat. So maybe Beatty kind of becomes a little bit redundant with Rios and McKinstry. So if he could potentially be the odd man out, and maybe they look to add another right-handed bat, whether one of their other prospects, like the guys you named, like DJ Peters, is kind of knocking on the door, so maybe he gets a shot, or maybe they sign a veteran on a 1-year type deal, which I'm sure we'll get into. One of the options is Nelson Cruz, depending on if there's a DH or not. But I feel like they definitely could use some right-handed bats, and I don't know. With Rios, like, if Rios and Beatty are both on the bench and there's a pinch hitting opportunity, like, who are you going with? Like, it's Rios. So
yeah. A couple of people mentioned Alana Rizzo, also a loss for the Dodgers in 2021, which is too bad. Loss. She came on our show early on and she was great. And so best of luck to her and whatever comes. I said, hey, if you ever need to talk Dodgers, Alana, you got a place here. Just let me know. We got a spot for you. We can fit 3 screens on here. We'll make it happen.
Yeah, I'm sure she'll get the itch at some point. She loves Dodger Blue so much, or just the Dodgers in general. I didn't mean our website, but yeah, she loves the Dodgers. She's definitely going to miss them at some point. But yeah, I wish her the best of luck as well. I've covered, a handful of games the last few years, and out of, everyone who works at the stadium, all the beat writers, she's the nicest one as far as the people I interacted with. She's not afraid to talk with whoever. She's very kind and cordial, so I thank her for that, and I wish her the best of luck.
Awesome. Well, let's get to the other piece of big Major League Baseball news, and this is kind of stuff that is developing over just the last hour as we record this on Monday night, is what's going to happen with the 2021 season. All these months of the offseason, we're sitting there thinking, okay, things are on track, things are on track, and then all of a sudden, I believe it's Friday night, Saturday morning, Tim Brown from Yahoo breaks the report that Major League Baseball had sent a proposal to the Players Association suggesting a few tweaks to the expectations. Number one was that the season would start a month later. This comes on the heels of something we talked about last week, which is the state of Arizona basically asking Major League Baseball to wait and not come for spring training. Well, then Major League Baseball, which there was some shadiness there because Major League Baseball essentially asked those people to make that request so that it wasn't Major League Baseball and the owners making the request, but it's actually the state of Arizona. There was definitely some shadiness there. But it's then followed by a proposal from Major League Baseball saying, hey, why don't we start the season a month later? We'll take 8 games off of the total season, and we'll finish the season a week later. So we're going to cram some doubleheaders, 7-inning games. But don't worry, players, you're still going to get paid for 162 games. We're going to add the DH we think was part of it, and we'll expand postseason. And that was the proposal. Now, we know that the union is anti-expanded postseason, and they were also very afraid of the extra power that this would give to Rob Manfred, where it says, hey, yes, we're going to get paid for 162 games, but maybe now Rob Manfred has sort of unilateral power to cancel games, to pause things, in which case maybe the players wouldn't be getting paid for some of those games. So they were worried. And Joel Sherman said the union did not see that proposal as guaranteeing 162 games of pay because of that. So all of this, of course, is fascinating because spring training is 2.5 weeks away. So some guys are already there. Other people have plans, plane flights booked, houses booked, whatever. Not to mention, they've trained their bodies and ramped up for spring training. So MLB issues a statement tonight basically saying, on the advice of medical experts, we proposed a 1-month delay, yada, yada, yada. The Players Association, as of tonight, I believe, rejected it and is not planning on countering it. This was their statement. Late last week, the MLBPA, for the first time this offseason, received a proposal from MLB to delay spring training and opening day by approximately 1 month. Under the proposal, the end of the season would be delayed 1 week, the regular season would be shortened to 154 games, and all 30 teams would be required to play several doubleheaders. Players would also be required to accept previously rejected proposals that link expanded playoffs with the expansion of the designated hitter. Although player salaries would not initially be prorated, MLB proposal offers no salary or service time protections in the event of further delays, interruptions, or cancellations of the season. And then it goes on to say, we've reviewed and discussed it, and we reject it. We don't make this decision likely. And then basically the report after that was everybody's showing up and it's business as usual. So what do you kind of make of all of this mess? What's your immediate reaction to all this?
Yeah, well, let me just start by saying I'm not at all surprised. Like, we saw these two sides go at it last year. I think last year was a lot worse, so I guess they got that going for them. Like, they're not disagreeing on as much as they did last year, but it can't help but be annoyed at all this going on like 2 weeks before the start of spring training. Like, come on, like let's get it together. Let's find something that works for both sides, and let's, get this season going. And I feel like the way the league and the owners are trying to frame this, like, they're always trying to make the players look like the bad guys, which to me is just bad business. Like, those are your players. Those are the people who make you money. Like, why would you want the fans thinking they're the bad guys? So that's a little ridiculous for me. But I just hope, and I think with this last statement that MLB made, I hope it's all over and done with, and we could just have a normal season. I guess I partly get why they wanted to move it back a month. Like, the pandemic is still going on, and maybe a month from now, it'll be a little better. Like, they'll have more vaccines out and stuff like that. But I don't think in the grand scheme of things, like, 1 month is going to make a huge difference. Like, if you don't have fans for the first month of the season and then things get better and then you could let fans in, like, that's, for me, that should be good enough. And like you said, the players have already have their arrangements for spring training. They're playing stuff. They're housing. Like, most of these guys don't live in Arizona and Texas, and it's not like you could just call a week before and figure out your housing. Like, these guys have gotten this figured out, and now if they're moving everything back a month, like, that screws with their plans, and they're gonna have to change that, which isn't easy. So I'm hoping that this is all over with. I will say I do want a universal DH in 2021, which looks like it might not be happening now, but they could still negotiate that, and who knows? Feel like that's in the best interest of both sides. And expanded postseason, we'll see about that. The players seem adamant about not wanting it, but maybe they could come to a compromise to maybe add a couple more teams to each league, as opposed to the full 8 from last year, which I just thought was way too much. But yeah, overall, I'm just very annoyed with all this, and I hate that we even have to talk about it, but it's not surprising at all. It's the owners are trying to make as much money as possible. And it's funny how they're framing it like it's about health and safety and stuff like that. Like, we know what you guys care about. We know it's all about the bottom line.
Yeah. And I mean, the backdrop to all of this is that we are 1 year away from these two having to negotiate a brand new collective bargaining agreement. Yeah. And so that's what makes this so fascinating is the owners have kind of made a couple different proposals, this being the first formal one, but they've had conversations. And what the owners have wanted to do is make it feel like they were giving in to the players on universal DH, and therefore the players should have to give them something in exchange. What they wanted was expanded playoffs, because that's just a crap load more money. The players are anti-expanded playoffs for a number of different reasons, and we don't have to get into those. But so basically, everybody knows the owners want the universal DH too. It's better for the game in a lot of ways. It adds, nobody wants to see hitters hitting or pitchers hitting. It just simplifies things in a lot of different levels. And so the owners have been disingenuous in saying, hey, we'll give you what you want. Now give us what we want. And the players are like, you want that too. Like, we're not conceding anything. Like, you're not giving us anything. And so when you say, hey, maybe we'll still be able to negotiate and have the DH, that's the only thing. I just don't see it happening because the owners have taken the stance of, oh, we don't actually want it publicly.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the players could possibly give in return for it. And with 1 year remaining until the CBA is up, I just don't see the players or the owners, basically taking the L on that one and saying, you know what, fine, everyone wants it, we'll just do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And one kind of analogy is like, let's say you and your wife both wanted burgers for dinner, but you want ice cream for dessert and she wants pie for dessert. So you pretend like you don't want burgers for dinner and you're like, all right, I'll get a burger for dinner if you get pie for dessert instead of ice cream or whatever it was. So it's basically like the owners are pretending like they don't want the universal DH when in reality everyone wants the universal. So they think they're being a lot more clever than they're actually being. Like the players union, they're not dumb people and they know exactly what's going on. So they're not going to give an inch. The owners aren't going to give an inch because they're greedy people. So we are at the stalemate, kind of similar to last year. But what it looks like is everything's just going to start on time. They're not going to move anything back by a month.
Yeah, and JJ says there's going to be a strike next year. And I mean, it definitely doesn't look great. We'll put it that way. I mean, there's not a positive relationship between these two organizations. They can't even come to an agreement on something simple as the universal DH, which, again, everybody knows they both want, and yet they can't. So that could be one small step towards, hey, progress, hey, things are in the right direction. But the good news is Major League Baseball's statement ends with, hey, their refusal to counter, so we're moving forward and instructing clubs to report for an on-time spring training. And they did say kind of at the end, we were able to complete a 2020 season through Herculean efforts and sacrifices made by our players, club staff, and MLB staff to protect one another. We'll do so again together as we work towards playing another safe and entertaining season in 2021. So there is that they're not a super high animosity statement there from the owners, which I guess is a positive thing. But yeah, I mean, I think that's where we're at. 162 game season for 2020, normal schedule. Fans in stadiums where they can get them. Obviously, California, Los Angeles not going to be having fans anytime soon because of the situation there. But that's where we're at. And so kind of pivoting there to another story that came out last week that is somewhat related, which is a rumor involving Nelson Cruz. So Dan Hayes of The Athletic, who is the Twins beat writer for The Athletic, had a quote in this story basically saying if the National League were to adopt a designated hitter, Nelson Cruz would, quote, be intrigued by the Dodgers and Braves, which are two teams who are looking for offensive help. Now, again, the premise of all this, going back to my interview with Pedro Mora, they're operating under the assumption there is no DH. I think I would bet more money there's no DH today than I would have 3 days ago based on everything that's happened. But let's pause all that for a second because let me say this. Nelson Cruz is not playing the field, okay? He hasn't played the field since 2018, and he has played 26 innings of defense since 2016, all right? So this guy is not playing the field. He is only as a designated hitter. If there were a designated hitter, I assume you love the idea of Nelson Cruz being a Dodger.
I mean, anyone who looks at that guy's stats, it's hard not to love the idea of Nelson Cruz in the Dodgers lineup. The guy is insane. Like, he's 40 years old, and he's still putting out elite offensive numbers, like, literally every year. It's not like, oh, yeah, it's a great year, then a bad year. No, it's every single year. He's not just good. He's great offensively. He hits – you could pencil him in for 40 homers and 100 RBIs if he plays a full season this year. So, yeah, I mean, the thought of adding that guy to an already incredible lineup for the Dodgers, it's hard not to be intrigued. The one thing I will say, though, is he is 40 years old, so he's got to fall off at some point. It's kind of similar to Tom Brady, right? Like, we keep saying every year, like, all right, this might be his last year. He's 40, he's 41, and here he is still 44, still going in the Super Bowl. So maybe it won't be this year. And if the Dodgers sign him, I hope it's not this year. But another thing is we saw in 2020 how much the Dodgers enjoyed the universal DH and using it to get guys days off, get Corey Seager off his feet for a day, get Cody Bellinger off his feet for a day, get Justin Turner a rest, but you could still have them in the lineup as the DH. They just don't have to play defense. If you're signing Nelson Cruz, he's an everyday DH, so you kind of lose that luxury. You could probably monitor his playing time. Like, he's 40 years old. He doesn't need to be in the lineup every single day. But I mean, if he's hot and hitting well, that's not a guy you want to take out of the lineup. So
Yeah.
They'll kind of lose that luxury, which I guess is not a huge deal considering they've played National League Baseball without a DH their whole careers. So it's nothing abnormal really for them. But yeah, I mean, if there is a universal DH, I would definitely be interested in signing this guy. He probably wouldn't come too expensive. It probably would only be a 1-year deal. Like you said from the report, he's intrigued by the Dodgers, so he has interest in them. So there wouldn't take much convincing there to get him to come sign with the defending world champions. So yeah, that's definitely something to keep an eye on. We'll see if there even is a DH.
Yeah, and one of the questions that we're getting from folks is Ozuna versus Cruz, and I'll let you answer that question in a second. Let me throw some numbers at you for Nelson Cruz. This is a guy who's hit 285 or higher in 5 of the last 6 seasons. He's had a slugging percentage over 549 5 of the last 6 seasons. He has hit 37 or more home runs every year since 2014. In 2020, he was on pace for over 40. 2019 was the best season of his career. 2020, you could argue, was his second best season of his career. He hits both righties and lefties well. He has no home road splits. So the guy is a monster. Let me phrase it this way, because it's hard to compare Ozuna to Cruz because Ozuna is going to ask for like a 4-year deal. So let's just, in a vacuum, Nelson Cruz or Marcell Ozuna, same length of contract, 1-year contract, same dollar number. In those circumstances, who do you like more?
If it's just a 1-year deal, I like Cruz more. I think he's gonna be just as good as the last couple years. This year, I don't think he's done yet. If it was like a 4-year deal, obviously you go Ozuna because he's a lot younger.
You don't want 45-year-old Nelson Cruz under contract?
No, but if I'm picking one guy to be my DH for just the 2021 season, I'm going Cruz. You just laid out the numbers. I don't feel like I need more of an argument than that. Ozuna's coming off a great year, but if you look at his career as a whole, like, his numbers are just up and down. Like, it's a big roller coaster. So you're not exactly sure what you're going to get from him. You know what you're going to get from Cruz. So one guy for this year only, I'm going Cruz.
Yeah, and Ozuna, I mean, the upside to Ozuna was you could theoretically throw him out in left field. I mean, this is a guy who used to be good defensively. He's much younger. He's not young necessarily, but he's much younger. So that's the plus side. But I do believe his platoon splits are a lot different too. I don't even think he was a guy necessarily that was playing every single day for the Braves. So I'm with you. I mean, Nelson Cruz's numbers. I mean, just let me repeat that. Nelson Cruz has 37 or more home runs every year since 2014. Now, obviously, that doesn't include 2020, but I think he had 16 home runs in 55 games. So he would have been on pace for 45-plus home runs in 2020. The guy's an animal. Yes, he'll turn 41 this year, but absolutely no signs of slowing down. So I'm with that. I'm with you. And I mean, plus, Ozuna being able to play left field isn't that big of a value add to the Dodgers because they have plenty of guys they could put in left field, all of whom would be better options in the field than Ozuna. So I'm with you. Nelson Cruz on a 1-year deal would be much better. Now, if there's no universal DH and you wanted to sign Ozuna under the assumption that, you know, that would be a weird one because we know the universal DH is going to be here in 2022 by all accounts. I mean, that's generally believed, but you couldn't sign necessarily either of those guys without the DH. I don't know what you would do with Ozuna given that you have Pollock already out in left field. So yeah, that's a great question. JJ, I believe you're the one who asked it. It looks like there's some debate. We got a couple people that say they would take Ozuna, and a couple people that agree with us that they'd take Cruz. So let's shift gears one more time here. And this is, and then we're going to get to some questions. So if you got some questions, I said on Twitter, I mean, it could be anything. You could ask me my favorite color is Skittles. I know there's not a ton of baseball news, and we've covered it. We got a potato chips question, which I very much appreciate. So we're going to get to that in a moment. But the biggest news story that wasn't Dodgers related necessarily was the trade of Nolan Arenado. Now, again, on Monday night, some news coming out that's sort of finalizing the deal, clarifying some things. Nolan Arenado traded to the St. Louis Cardinals. There was rumors, I guess I should say singular rumor, Jim Bowden saying that the Dodgers were going to trade for Arenado before Christmas. That turned out to be bogus on about 1,000 different fronts, one of which is the Rockies have just basically said we're not going to trade him to the Dodgers. As a Dodger fan, I hate that. As a Rockies fan, I would be saying hell no, we're not trading him to the Dodgers. Like, so the flip side is obviously the return is much different. So I believe the numbers as of tonight, if I'm reading it right, is that the Rockies are not sending the $50 million that was originally indicated, but maybe it's just $35 million, his full salary in 2021. I could be wrong about that. Again, this is all coming in live. But the flip side is they got a handful of guys. None of them are expected to be impact players. The headliner is Austin Gomber, who's a 27-year-old pitcher. He was good in 2020, not a top 100 prospect. I don't believe any of the other guys that they got were even top 10 prospects in the Cardinals system. So it was a pretty ridiculous trade on a lot of levels. And I guess I would phrase it this way. The package they got back makes sense to me if St. Louis was inheriting the entirety of Nolan Arenado's contract.
Yeah.
The fact that they were paying $35 million tells me you only pay that if you think you're getting back some high-level prospect, which I just don't see in this package. So we can get into the no-trade clause and the opt-outs and all of that, but on the surface, is this trade as bad as it looks for the Rockies?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say it any better than you just did. To me, it didn't make any sense. Like if you're gonna be paying off some of his salary, and $50 million is no small amount, then to me, you should be getting an elite prospect return back, which they didn't. Like you said, they got the return of if they're just giving up Nolan Arenado and his entire salary. When you're doing that, it's a lot of money, with $270 million or whatever he's got left. Then you can't expect to get top prospects back. Yeah. But when you're eating $50 million and paying his entire salary in 2020, to me this doesn't make any sense. It was clear they didn't want to trade with the Dodgers. They could have easily gotten a better package from the Dodgers. Like, I guarantee you, Friedman could have beat that offer easily. And if you're doing that, yes, you're trading your star player to a division rival, which is never ideal. But you are going into a rebuild. Like, it's pretty clear that the Rockies are not going to be competing this year or anytime soon. So why would you not want to get the best prospect return possible? And if that's from your division rivals, like, so be it. If anything, you're weakening them in the future by taking some of their top prospects. So yeah, that deal as a whole just didn't make any sense to me. And one other thing is Arenado didn't even give up his opt-outs, and in fact, they even added one after 2022. So if, let's say, it doesn't work out in St. Louis this year, he could be a free agent next year, or he could stick around for one more year and become a free agent the year after that. So we'll see how long he lasts in St. Louis. We know the Dodgers have had interested in him. They've been interested in him forever, it feels like. Yeah. And I think something that I saw that you tweeted out is from Andy McCullough's story. Yeah. It was he basically told an anecdote about how he was at Dodger Stadium one day in 2017. He was just hanging out by the dugout for BP or whatever. And he sees Corey Seager and Nolan Arenado chatting it up, whatever. Nothing abnormal there. But then a few seconds later, Seager walks over laughing and says, like, that guy wants to be a Dodger so bad, or something of that nature. So it's pretty clear Nolan wants to be a Dodger as well. So who knows? Maybe a year or two from now, when he becomes a free agent, that could be something to keep an eye on. He grew up in Southern California as a Dodger fan. So, yes, he's on the Cardinals now. That's no fun. We all hate the Cardinals. Yeah. And they're probably, I feel like they have to be considered the favorites in the NL Central now, just because no one else has done anything in that division this offseason except get worse. So, yeah, it's not going to be fun watching him on the Cardinals, but the hope of him being a Dodger, it's still out there. Who knows? Maybe a year or two down the line.
Yeah, the thing that's interesting to me about the conversation regarding Arenado is his contract. And so he had 6 years and $199 million left on his contract. As part of the reworking, basically in order to get him to waive his no-trade clause, they added on 1 year at the end of the deal for an additional $15 million. So it basically goes to becoming a 7-year, $214 million contract for Arenado is what he's owed. And yes, Arenado is an unbelievable player. He's one of the best in the game. But that contract, I mean, that's the thing, right? It's not a bargain. I mean, if Arenado were to hit free agency, that's probably about what he would get, is 7 years and $210 million. So that's what makes this so complicated is, yes, like, and again, them throwing money into the deal is what makes this so crazy for the Rockies. But just on paper, Arenado and that contract, every team would like to have him, but not every team necessarily can afford to be paying him $30 million a year, which I think complicates this. But as you pointed out, he he retains every Dodger fan basically when this came out was like, well, dang it, he probably had to waive his opt-out at the end of the season. And then reports come to like, not only did he not waive his opt-out after this season, he added one the year after, which to me is super interesting for this reason. This offseason, we know of all the shortstops, all the left side of the infield guys who are going to be free agents, including Corey Seager, Francisco Lindor, if he doesn't re-up, Carlos Correa, Javi Baez, etc. The year after his old teammate Trevor Story, which who knows what, I mean, they better trade him or extend him or something. But I wonder if Arenado added that second one because he's like, hey, you know what? Maybe I give it 2 years in St. Louis. I don't want to hit the market the same time as Corey Seager and all these other guys, but maybe give me the year after, and he's the best guy on the market. He gets one last big contract there. So that's interesting to me. I'm with you. I still think if you're a Dodger fan, you're not crossing off Arenado as a future. Now, by all accounts, he's excited to go to St. Louis. That's a franchise that they're going to treat him really, really well. Paul Goldschmidt is there. They should be competitive, but it's not a sure thing. And so if the Cardinals were to not be that great this year, or if they were to not be great the following year, definitely still within the realm of possibilities that Arenado could opt out. And because he probably wouldn't be giving up money. He could probably go collect whatever the dollar number is in LA or wherever else he wanted to get it.
Right.
So that'll definitely be an interesting one there. And sort of related to that, before we get to some mailbag questions, we talked about the Dodgers could have made a better offer for Nolan Arenado. Obviously, I mean, most teams in baseball could. I'm sure there's lots of teams that are like, dang it, that's all it would have taken. Like most teams are like, well, we don't have the guts to ask for $35 million back, and yet this is all it would have cost. Keith Law had an interesting note. You've got an article for DodgerBlue.com that's coming out later this week mentioning it, but basically saying that the Dodgers are willing to discuss Keibert Ruiz in just about every major trade proposal. So if it were a Nolan Arenado deal, if it were a deal for someone else, Keibert Ruiz is the number one guy that the Dodgers are talking about. Not surprising on a number of levels. He's a top 100 prospect, has been for a couple of years. So I can see other teams being interested in him. He's a catcher that probably would start on half of the teams in baseball right now and be an upgrade over what they have. Catching position is just such a black hole right now when it comes to talent. But not only that, he just has no pathway to playing time in Los Angeles. Austin Barnes is under contract for 2 more years, or I guess team control for 2 more years. Will Smith is a superstar at the catching position. He's not going anywhere. And again, we've talked about they've got a guy, Diego Cartaya, who's a couple years behind Ruiz, that many people think is the best of the bunch. So any surprise to you to hear Law say that Ruiz is being discussed in just about every major trade proposal the Dodgers are in talks about?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised at all. I feel like we just talked about the Dodgers catching situation maybe a week or 2 ago, but you just laid it out pretty well. They have Will Smith, who's going to be their starter for the next however many years, and they got Austin Barnes behind him for the next 2 years, and Austin Barnes is a fine backup. He's probably the best backup in baseball. So there's really no, spot for Ruiz right now or in the next 2 years. And then once 2 years go by, like you said, they got Diego Cartaya, who's only 19 now, but in 2 years, when he's 21, he could very well be the best prospect in baseball.
Yeah.
And the Dodgers also just signed another catcher, Jesus Galiz, who's one of the top international free agents this year. Yeah. So they're absolutely stacked at the catching position, I should say. So for me, Ruiz just makes the most sense in a trade. He's still, by pretty much every publication that's come out with prospect lists, he's still a top 100 guy.
Yeah.
Mostly, I'd say from what I've seen, he's in the 50 to 70 range. So he's not like a top guy, but that's still a very good prospect. He's only 21, 22 years old, whatever it is. I think there definitely are teams out there looking for catching. I feel like the catcher position across the league is pretty much a black hole. Like there's only a handful of good catchers. So yeah, I definitely think if there is a big trade to be had, I think his name, as far as prospects go, would be the main one to be involved.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Mike Petrello from MajorLeagueBaseball.com, I think, was doing the top 10 at every position. And when he got to catcher, I mean, I think Will Smith was like 3rd, 4th, or 5th or something in all of baseball. And so, King Yellowman says, hey, Will Smith needs to play some other positions to get at bats. I mean, he's going to be your everyday catcher every day as far as a catcher. He'll catch, 3 to 4 times out of every 5 games. And so he's going to get all the at-bats he could possibly need. Now, if the designated hitter does exist, then he could be hitting on his off days too, because he's going to be an absolute weapon offensively, but
Right.
he's plenty good behind the plate. So he'll be getting lots of stuff there. So yeah, I mean, DJ says trade Ruiz and Beatty. I mean, I think those are the types of players that the Dodgers can offer is prospects like Ruiz who are backed up, as well as some guys like DJ Peters, Zach Rex, Matt Beatty. These are all guys that are major league ready. They're just in the wrong place. I think it was with Pedro Mora again in the interview that I had last week that he just said the Dodgers are an unbelievable group at developing players. So if you were to get drafted by the Dodgers or sign internationally, on one hand, you could trust that you would be developed better there than anywhere else. The flip side is once you get to the major league level, unless you're Will Smith or some of these other guys that just, Corey Seager, Cody Bellinger, Walker Buehler, that just slam through the ceiling, it's going to be hard to sort of, it's not a slow acclimation process. It's if you can't contribute to winning a World Series right now, then we don't have time for you. So
and real quick, while we're talking about development, I think Keibert, he still has a good amount of development to go. Like, yes, he is, more or less major league ready. We saw him in a few games last year, but from all the prospect guys I follow, they love him defensively. They think he could be a Gold Glove type, defensive catcher. But his bat, they've kind of been waiting for it to come around all these years. When I say all these years, it's like 3 or 4 years, whatever it is. He's only 22, but they've been waiting for his bat to come around, and it really hasn't yet. So now we've seen on some of the prospect lists, he's kind of trending downward, I'd say. And that's just because no one knows if that bat is ever going to come around. So who knows? I would look to kind of trade him soon before, if he goes out and has a bad 2021 season at AAA or whatever, then you could see his value drop even more. And then at that point, he can't even be a headliner in a big type of deal anymore. So, yeah, if there's a deal to be had, I definitely would be trying to make it.
Yeah. Well, let's get to some mailbag questions. I mean, the biggest one we've been getting, and Kenneth is the latest person to asking, what's up with Justin Turner? Why have we not announced the deal with Justin Turner? You can chime in. I believe it was Keith Law, I could be wrong about that, saying that the Dodgers and Turner are still not on the same page as far as number of years, that kind of thing. I mean, I'm assuming the dollar numbers, they're probably in the same ballpark, but we've talked about the Dodgers most likely holding strong at 2 years, Justin Turner wanting 3, possibly even 4. Anything you would add to that? I mean, it doesn't seem like there's a ton of movement or a ton of updates coming out of either camp.
Yeah, we haven't heard a whole lot. I feel like the Dodgers maybe are kind of calling Turner's bluff here. I'm sure they've offered him a fine 2-year deal, and I guess he's just holding out for more at this point. So they, if I had to guess, I'd say they said, if you could go out and get a 3 or 4 year deal from somewhere else, go for it by all means. But if you can't, we got a 2-year deal waiting for you here, and I'm sure you'd love to come back. So I think that's where we're at right now. Maybe if it came down to it, the Dodgers add like a third option year, mutual option or something like that. But I can't see the Dodgers giving him, a straight 3 or 4 year deal at the age of 36. So if that's what he's holding out for, he'll be waiting a while. But at the end of the day, I still think he'll be back with the Dodgers. I don't see we've seen a lot of the other teams that we're interested in have gone other ways. So I don't know what options he has left. So with spring training is a couple weeks away. I'm hoping this comes to an end, pretty soon here.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Toronto was a team that was mentioned. They went and spent all their money. The Mets have been mentioned. They've spent a lot of money. So, I know Atlanta was mentioned. That almost feels like the type of team where Turner's camp leaks, that Atlanta is interested as a team that's it's super, in contention with the Dodgers, in theory. So, we'll see what goes on there. A couple other questions. Oscar, I see your question. We're going to get to that one in a minute. This came from Twitter. OMG Tino G asked, with 2021 being the last year before both Seager and Kershaw become free agents, shouldn't the Dodgers go for it all instead of trying to preserve prospects? We might not be this good again for a while. Thoughts, please.
My thoughts is that the Dodgers window is not closing anytime soon. The two guys he mentioned, Kershaw and Seager, they're obviously huge contributors. I would expect both of those guys back next year. And if, let's say, for some reason they can't sign Seager, there's plenty of other shortstop options out there. Like pretty much every good shortstop in baseball is a free agent next year. So I have a feeling they'd be able to come away with one of those guys, probably Seager. And I think at this point, I don't see Kershaw going anywhere. So I don't think the Dodgers, it's a scenario where the window's closing and they have to go all in now and get another ring or two before having to blow it all up. That's not the case at all. The Dodgers window it's going to stay open for a very long time, and it's because of the prospects. It's because they keep, drafting and developing these guys really well. So, yeah, I mean, I'd love to see the Dodgers make a big trade. But even if they do, I don't consider that going all in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah,
but.
no, I mean, yeah, it's yes, Seager and Kershaw are both free agents, but the question is sort of operating under the assumption that this will be their last year with the team, which I don't think the Dodgers are operating under. I mean, yes, Kershaw is getting up there in age, and while he is still very good, he's not the best pitcher in baseball as he has been for the past decade or so. But yeah, I mean, I think if Seager, everyone is hoping he's back, and I think if he's not back, they're going to be replacing him with a comparable level player there.
Right.
And as far as going for it all, I mean, I don't know what exactly the Dodgers could be doing right now to, quote, go for it all. I mean, maybe go out and sign a guy like Trevor Bauer or that kind of thing, but it's not like they have holes anywhere else really other than at third base, maybe second base, where they could just go out and upgrade. So I don't think the Dodgers are playing it safe. I mean, let's remember, they did just win the World Series with a team that you and I both think was worse than it is today. We like the 2021 roster better than we did the 2020 roster, and the 2020 roster was the best team in baseball and won the World Series. So it's a great question, but yeah, I don't necessarily think you have to choose between trying to win a World Series and preserving prospects. Oscar Camarena asks, what's a bullpen piece we can pursue? Seems like the Dodgers are in need of a lefty reliever. A couple names that we've mentioned on the show before, Trevor Rosenthal, he's not a lefty, but he's probably the best relief pitcher, I would say, left on the market. And as far as a lefty, I mean, two guys' names that we've both mentioned before. One is Jake McGee, who the Dodgers had last year, and the numbers were pretty good for Jake McGee. And the other one, I'll let you say your other guy. He doesn't necessarily fit into the bullpen mold, necessarily fit that stereotype, but who's the lefty you like, Daniel?
Good old Dick Mountain, baby. He's come out of the bullpen before.
Sure.
He started. We all know Rich real well. So maybe a nice little 1 year, $2 million type deal for him to come be a little swing man, start a few games here and there, maybe come out of the bullpen in the postseason. I'd love that. But I'd say Jake McGee's probably a better fit. He was really good for the Dodgers last year.
Terry Benthal asked, do you think Arenado opts out of his contract with the Cards to become a Dodger after next year? If you had to guess, Daniel, confidence level of 0 to 100, Nolan Arenado opting out of his contract at the end of next season.
I'll put it at 20%. I'm not going to go too high. By all accounts, the Cardinals are a really good organization. That's a great baseball town. They got great fans. And like I said earlier, I mean, they're the hands-on favorite to win that division. So if they win the division, that's and get to the postseason, who knows how far they'll go. But that's what all Arenado has wanted. Like, after playing in Colorado all these years, the guy just wants to win. So I'd say that comes first. And if they have a good year this year, I don't see him opting out, or maybe he opts out and re-signs with the Cardinals on a different type of deal. I'm not really too familiar with his deal, and I don't even know how old he is. What's he, like 30 or 29 or so?
I think he might be low 30s.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure, but yeah, I'll put it at 20%.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair number. So he's 29. You're right. 29, turns 30 in April. So he's got 7 years left on the deal again. So take him through his 35, 36. Yeah, I mean, if he's going to opt out, for me, it's not after this upcoming year, but it's the next. Unless a bunch of these guys who are going to be free agents next year all extend, I don't think it would be worth leaving the contract and all that money on the table to go try and compete with Corey Seager and Trevor Story and Francisco Lindor for cash. So I would say 20%. I think that's a fair number. I was going to say maybe 15% next year. Now, if you're saying what are the odds he opt out in either next year or the year after, I mean, then maybe you get closer to 40 or 50%.
Yeah.
Who do the Cardinals have some decent players, but some of their better guys like Paul Goldschmidt are getting up there in age. Now they've got some good pitching. With Flaherty and those types of players. So like you said, I mean, the bar is very low for Arenado's expectations and, for a baseball organization. So it sounds like he'll be fine there. And again, he's apparently really excited about going there. So he has waived his no trade clause and then regained his no trade clause as part of the deal. Okay. 2 more questions that we've got here. A lot of people asking about Chris Bryant. We've talked about this before. Chris Bryant, if Justin Turner does not re-sign with the Dodgers, is Chris Bryant sort of plan B, do you think, for the Dodgers?
I'm not really sure, what the Cubs are doing, to be honest.
Yeah.
I thought Chris Bryant would have been traded by now for for me, there's no reason for them to hang on to him for one more year and then lose him for nothing. So I thought they would have traded him by now. He's going into the final year of his deal. And the Cubs, by all the moves they've made this offseason, it doesn't look like they're planning to compete.
Yeah.
So
hey, what are you trying to say about our guy Joc, man?
Joc, I think, was the only free agent they've added. Other than that, it's been all subtractions.
Yeah.
So, but, I mean, I'm not sure what the Cubs are doing, to be honest. But if he's available, I definitely think the Dodgers should be interested. First of all, because the prospect return wouldn't be, that high. He's, like I just said, he's only got 1 year left, so it's a 1 year rental in theory. And second of all, I mean, he kind of money-wise, I think he fits well for 1 year. If you're re-signing Justin Turner, that's 2 or 3 years, and there's not too many other options out there. I'd say one other guy we've talked about is Eugenio Suarez. He's under control for 4 more years if you trade for him. So I think just with the Dodgers timeline, trading for Chris Bryant and having him for 1 year makes sense. And then you got that money freed up next year to give to Corey Seager or Clayton Kershaw, like that question Tino just asked. So I think it would make sense if the Cubs are looking to deal him, but I have no clue what they're up to over there.
Yeah, I mean, we know the Yu Darvish return was not as high as many people expected. Chris Bryant would be far less. Yu Darvish is one of the best pitchers in baseball right now. Chris Bryant is coming off of a rough year. He's got 1 year left. He's not cheap. I think he's making like $19 million or something in arbitration this year.
Yeah.
So he would not be a Keibert Ruiz. Like, that would not be the type of return I wouldn't expect for a guy like Chris Bryant. It would probably be, a couple guys sort of around the 10 or 11 mark in the Dodgers system. So yeah, I mean, you and I are both said like, hey, why not? Like, if you said, hey, Chris Bryant or Edwin Rios, as much as I love Rios, I would say, great, bring in Chris Bryant. A couple people have mentioned Chris Bryant has some experience playing left field. I mean, he's probably a lot like Rios. Like, technically, he could play left field. I'm not sure the Dodgers, a team that values defense, would make it. But Iray says, is his bat a question mark? I mean, there's definitely people that have doubts about how good Chris Bryant is. But again, I've said crystal clear, I'm a high ceiling guy. Chris Bryant, at like 2 or 3 years ago, was one of the best players in all of baseball. And so there's no reason to believe the Dodgers couldn't bring that out of him, or at least get back to 80 or 90%. And if you do bring him in and he is great, I mean, the Dodgers clearly don't have a quote-unquote long-term answer at third base right now. Cody Hosey's a guy we've talked about on the show before, but he's probably 2 years away. And so, I mean, if Chris Bryant comes in, likes it, crushes it, the Dodgers could easily re-sign him. So we got one more question here, and this is the most important question of the day. This is from Kalen Scott. This is from Twitter, asking about potato chips. Daniel, he wants to know, A, are we potato chip guys? And B, I'm just going to ask for him your favorite potato chips. Kalen said his number one is sea salt and vinegar. That's my wife. She's really into that. I'm not a fan of sea salt and vinegar. I am a potato chip guy. Are you a potato chip guy, and what's your favorite kind?
I mean, I'm not a huge potato chip guy, but I eat chips every now and then. I'd say that's the case for everyone. And I kind of like a variety, to be honest. I don't know if I have one favorite. I like Sun Chips a lot. Okay. They got a bunch of different flavors. I like them all.
Are you a green bag guy, an orange bag guy, or a blue bag guy?
I'd say if I had my choice of all of them, I'm going with the green bag. So is that like sour cream and onion, I think? I'm not exactly sure.
I think so. Green's the way to go.
I like the green one, but I like the cheese ones too. I like the cheesy Doritos. I like the red Doritos a lot more than the blue Doritos. But I like barbecue chips too. So like nice barbecue, like kettle type chips. Those are up there as well for me.
Well, you just insulted my favorite kind. I mean, some Cool Ranch Doritos. I had some friends. They just referred to. There's nothing better than opening a big old bag of Cool Ranch Doritos, just fresh, like just not stale, even in the slightest Cool Ranch Doritos. I'm a big potato chip guy. I love kettle chips. There's a brand up here in Oregon, which kettle chips are from Oregon, where I live. But there's a local brand up here called Juanita's, and they do like just regular tortilla chips, and then they started coming out with flavored tortilla chips. They've got like 3 different flavors of their tortilla chips. Oh man, so good. So I mean, it's danger zone for me. I could eat potato chips like nonstop. My potato chip consumption has gone through the roof over the last 10 months. So quarantine like ice cream levels and potato chip levels, I think have gone through the roof in my household.
Yeah, that's why I try to avoid potato chips. I feel like, because if you eat one, like,
Yeah.
or at least for me, like if I eat one, I got to eat the whole bag.
Yeah.
Like I just can't stop with those things. I guess it's the salt or the sodium or whatever, but yeah. So yeah, I try to stay away from potato chips. Ice cream, on the other hand, though, I love ice cream.
It's funny to look at the comments. So we've got Lay's, just plain Lay's, I'm guessing. I mean, I'll eat them, but I've never understood that, like, give me plain chips over something with flavor.
Yeah.
Bob Jones is with me. Cool Ranch are the best. Sour cream and onion Pringles from Paul Rubio. I haven't had Pringles in a long time. DJ Jesse says Doritos. We got sour cream and cheddar from Terry. Yeah, I mean, I could crush some sour cream and cheddar Ruffles, no problem. Guillermo says Juanita's cheese squeeze. I'm not familiar with those. I wonder if we're talking about different Juanitas here. Oh, Robert says the chili cheese Fritos. That's the other one. Fritos had these like honey barbecue, like little spiral chips at one point. Those were pretty fantastic. We got Cool Ranch, Takis. We got some options here. So anyways, well, we'll go out on that. If you've got fun questions like that, we'll take them. Hopefully we've got more news to talk about in the next 7 days or so. Right. But for now, we'll take them. So, hey, we appreciate you all joining us. There's a lot of you joining us tonight. We appreciate that. We appreciate you spending your night with us, talking Dodgers, engaging with us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, wherever you're joining us. So that's Daniel. My name is Jeff. We appreciate it. DodgerBlue.com, the latest news, everything you need right there. Subscribe to Dodger Blue 1958 on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc. And number one thing, make sure on the YouTube channel you are subscribed to our YouTube channel and that you're getting notifications. Give us a thumbs up as well. The notifications will let you know. I keep saying it. As soon as Justin Turner re-signs or does something, we're going to have the news. If there's a trade, whatever it is, you're going to want to be subscribed to our YouTube channel so that you get it right away. We appreciate you. It's been a great night. We made it. We're at an hour and 10 despite no real news in Dodgerland. So we couldn't have done it without you. As always, we're going to leave you with the words of Vince Scully reminding us that the Dodgers are still champs.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.